Good day, everybody. Welcome to our newest program here at Two-Way, Cancer Decoded. Very excited about this show. Very happy that it's now on the air. I want to tell you a quick story. A few years ago, a member of my family had cancer, and we asked a family friend who had gone through something very similar if they would, of course, be willing to help us navigate through the process. And what they said still rings in my ear. They said, "We don't do cancer." They had been through it, and they decided they didn't want to deal with it again. This program is what we hope will be the first of many of creating authentic community around people with diseases, adults, pediatric, people around the world. What do they need? They need a sense of authentic community. They also need information. I'm from a pretty well-educated, pretty well-connected family. And when we deal with the disease, and whether it's cancer or something else, we struggle to find information. There's great information out there in the world, but finding it and knowing how to separate the good from the bad is a challenge. So one reason this show exists is to create that sense of community, that you're not alone in dealing with this. Second is information. And finally, we think it's an opportunity to use technology and particularly the two-way format and technology to bring people together rather than do what so much of our media does, which is to divide. So that's why this show exists. And as I said, I hope it'll be the first of many. And I couldn't be happier to have as my partner in this, my co-host, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, who is an extraordinary person. He's extraordinary in a lot of ways, but I'll tell you 3 ways that he's extraordinary that are applicable to his being part of this. First of all, he's brilliant. He's one of the world's leading experts on cancer. And I have heard him talk about many topics, and every time he talks, he's brilliant. That's good. It's good to have a brilliant doctor. But we've all seen brilliant doctors with no bedside manner. He's also extraordinarily caring. And when he's been on this platform before, he has touched so many of us and so many of you because of his obvious concern. And I know many people whom he has helped privately, all of whom speak about his support, the combination of information and intellect, and also caring in reverent tones. And I'm so honored to be able to bring his capacity in those 2 areas to a wider audience. The other thing that's remarkable about him, and I've known a lot of doctors and business people in my life, is his interdisciplinary understanding. He's an extraordinarily successful business person. He knows how to navigate the government. That's no small thing. And he understands markets, and he understands the science community, not just in the United States, but around the world. There may be someone like the doctor out there, but I don't know them. I've never seen them. And I couldn't be happier to have him be part of this and more honored. So, Doctor, welcome. Very glad to have you be part of this program, Cancer Decoded, which is really your show. I'm just here to try to traffic cop a little bit, but thank you. And I'd love for you to talk about why this show is something as busy as you are that you're going to make time to do.
Well, first of all, thank you for those kind words, Mark. Look, I think, as you said, my fear and my concern is not only is cancer on the rise, and as I said in some shows before, my greatest fear is it's affecting young people. And, we are at the stage of our lives where you always worry about cancer in the older generation, but they've lived a good life. Now, if you're seeing, and I'm seeing it more often in our clinics than ever, and it's completely heartbreaking that you see young people with this disease and the opportunity that's been taken away from them. What we want to bring in this show is not just information, but hope, but not false hope. I really want to bring thought leaders, scientists like Dr. Hagi, who every day are seeing cancer patients and with whom we will have these conversations so that we can actually share what we really think is the best care for that patient. And the opportunity to have this show with you where we can have these long-form conversations that are not tied to any agenda other than truly to inform, provide hope, inspire, and really educate. So thank you for bringing part of this two-way. I love most, believe it or not, is when we talk to the patients on your show.
Yeah.
To me, that's an opportunity to really interact with our audience.
So we were going to do that as always with two-way. If you're here on the platform and you want to be able to ask a question, it can be small, large. It can be about your specific situation or your interest in cancer research in general, latest treatments. Please raise your hand. I don't need to on this program. I hope mention the presumption of grace, but everyone will bring that to the conversation. And if you're watching on X or on two-way or on YouTube, live or recorded, thank you for being part of it. If you'd like to be in a position to ask questions in a future episode, please go to two-way.tv. The doctor and I will talk just a little bit, and then we're going to bring in his colleague who was mentioned, Dr. Haggie, who's got some extraordinary story to tell us about recent treatment of what is one of the most dangerous and deadly forms of cancer, with some hope there. And one of his patients will be with us as well. And then again, we'll take your questions. As Dr. Patrick said, this program exists primarily as a two-way conversation. So if you'd like to be in on the conversation and you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. Doctor, one of the things that you are on the cutting edge of is new ways of treating cancer, and particularly the BioShield, which you've talked about here before. I'd like you, as always in this program, we try to be both sophisticated and accessible. So let's start from the beginning. Explain what the BioShield is, where it started, and what its current status is as an alternative way of thinking about cancer treatment.
So again, Mark, for this platform, look, it's taken me 30 years to finally realize that what we have in front of us, it's almost hiding in plain view, that we have in our body this thing called the natural killer cell. So I don't know if your producers have this natural killer cell, if we could put them up to show what the cell does. It's a video of this natural killer cell just chomping away at cancer.
There it is.
So what you're seeing there is quite literally, that's not a animation. That's a time-lapse video of a natural killer cell that's in your body. What's amazing is that cell has evolved over 450 million years ago in order for mammalians to survive. What it's doing right now is chomping away at that cancer cell. And as you see in the corner of your eye there, a T cell is now coming. So when you take this natural killer cell and the T cells, that's what's in your body called lymphocytes. And it turns out that if we can protect the immune system and reconstitute these lymphocytes, that is what God gave us to protect us against cancer. There's a completely different paradigm of thinking that perhaps cancer is merely a symptom of the fact that as you age or as you get infected, your lymphocytes collapse and your protection disappears. So if the disease, in fact, is a collapse of your immune system, and we treat the immune system, we thereby treat cancer. What has been bothering me for 30 years is that all our treatments, and we learn today, radiation, chemotherapy, steroids, collapse the immune system. So that's why we need to rethink this entire strategy.
And how widely is the BioShield being tested today? How many people are being treated that way, and what's the next step to make it more broad?
Well, it's approved. It's FDA approved for the treatment of bladder cancer. It's FDA approved to describe the mechanism of action. It's the first lymphocyte stimulating agent that actually proliferates these natural killer cells. And we've now tested 8,000 doses safely. So the idea is to educate not only the world and bring it to the world, but everybody, doctors, regulators, patients, about this opportunity to really rethink how we treat cancer.
Right now, is this the leading new innovation in cancer treatment, or are there others you'd like to talk about?
No, it's going to be very careful. This is not a show about what we do. It's a show about whatever is out there in the world. And I think what's out there in the world is a new understanding that biology, whatever that biology is, to engaging the NK cell, the T cell, the memory cell, what we call the vaccine, what we call the BioShield, And there's been CAR T cell therapy, checkpoint inhibitor therapy, pharma therapy, big pharma, small pharma, biotech. What we want to do is whatever's the best interest of the patient to give you a quality of life and educate you about that. It so happens that that's what I've been doing in my career for 30 years. But I want to be very clear that this is not about what we do, it's about what's best for the patients.
Understood. Talk about your history. How did you become someone so interested in cancer? When you went to medical school, did you know that's what you would focus on?
Yeah, look, I've been always fascinated by the pancreas for whatever reason. It's the most complex organ in the body, whether it's you have diabetes, with pancreatitis, or with pancreatic cancer. So by the time I came to UCLA, I was doing all the pancreas transplants in at UCLA, but I was also removing the pancreases for patients with cancer. And therefore, that forced me to understand the immune system because, on the one hand, I'm trying to protect the transplanted organ to suppress the immune system. On the other hand, I'm trying to kill the cancer by activate the immune system. And it just pushed me into this whole world of what I call quantum dynamics, that our body is exquisitely balanced with cells that on one hand want to kill the bad stuff and the other hand want to suppress the killers because you don't want to get autoimmune disease. So I needed to understand that. It's taken me 30 years to understand that. And it boils down to a simple test in your blood count called the lymphocyte count. So I've just been blessed. This country has given me the opportunity to not only pursue that vision, but to have the resources to pursue that vision. So, I understand how you describe me as a physician, a scientist, a doctor, and then finally as an entrepreneur. The entrepreneurial portion of it is really so that I can have the resources to do what we do. And, I was brought up in both the Anglican and Catholic way, where the sister would tell me, no money, no mission. And this is what this is all about. And the mission is to find a cure for cancer.
Doctor, anything you want to discuss before we bring your colleague in?
No, I think the best part of these shows is exactly not even you or I,
Yeah,
is about really the colleagues and the patients.
yeah,
So I can't wait to have Dr. Hage join us. And
yeah. Okay. So this program will have featured guests, leading researchers, practitioners, government officials, and great stories from people from around the country and around the world of people who have struggled in this challenge, and lots of stories of people who have succeeded, but also people who are going through it now. So we're honored to have for our first guest on our first episode, um, the doctor's colleague, Dr. Simon Hagi. Doctor, welcome in. Grateful to you. You can go ahead and unmute. I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Patrick in a second, but just tell folks where you live, what kind of practice you've done over the course of your career, and the current research and treatment that you're engaged in.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. And grateful to you for being part of this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So where I practice is here in Newport Beach, California. And I came here by way of a very classic academic background, medical school in the Midwest, and then training pretty much all along the East Coast from Dartmouth, Tufts, and Duke. And I went into neuro-oncology, also focusing a lot of my time and effort, my research efforts on brain tumors because I felt that there was an incredible lack of advancement in the field of neuro-oncology, specifically for tumors like glioblastoma. So I have been focusing a lot of my energy on glioblastoma since I completed my training. Taking into all my experience, almost 24 years of focusing on medicine, and the latter 10 focusing on glioblastoma and other very difficult cancers to treat.
Talk about why that's such a difficult cancer. All of them are difficult, but why this is particularly difficult.
Yeah, glioblastoma represents a disease that knows no boundaries. It is a disease of the brain. It does not necessarily go outside the brain, but because it is in the brain and typically very eloquent areas, it has profound impact on people's quality of life and how they interact with the world. Seeing what my patients go through on a day-to-day basis, especially when I was first starting out in the field, it almost felt like an injustice that they just did not have adequate therapeutics. A lot of the drugs that we give them, like the current chemotherapy options that we have for them, which is very limited, and radiation. And because we're focusing on the brain, further damages that organ, further robs them of their personalities, their independence, and the way they interact with the world. And I felt that, things need to change.
Yeah. Patrick, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the research, and then we'll have the good fortune and blessing to talk to one of Dr. Hagi's patients. But I turn it over to you to talk about the
Great.
research.
So, Simon, thank you for joining us. And I think he's been a little modest. He's one of the best neuro-oncologists in the country. We're really excited when he came to the West Coast, and I've watched him treat his patients, and it's been amazing. Look, I think I agree with Dr. Hagi. You think of glioblastoma very much like an iceberg, where you see the tip of the iceberg, and sadly, the tumor is within that brain, and even surgical resection doesn't fully remove it. And I'll ask later on for Dr. Hagi to actually show some pictures of what an MRI in a glioblastoma looks like, and Simon will have the producers put it up. But really, the treatment, sadly, and as you could see, we'll talk about what is the survival rate of and what has changed over 40 years. If you get glioblastoma, what's the first line, what I call first line of treatment? Maybe, Dr. Hagi, can you just tell us what you think, what
Yeah.
is the current first line of treatment?
Yeah, the first line of treatment usually involves, the best surgery that you can get, basically. And sometimes that's just a biopsy because it's in an area that can't be accessed, successfully and to actually be removed. But the surgeon will do their best and they aim to do what we call a gross total resection. That is then followed by a combination of radiation and chemotherapy for 6 weeks. The chemotherapy is every day and the radiation is Monday through Friday for 6 weeks, followed by the additional chemotherapy after that, with or without the use of a device called tumor treating fields or Optune, which is fairly standard, but very few people actually use it and adopt it into their practice.
And what do you see as the sort of, if the patient then recurs, which is very, very often,
Mhm.
what happens next and what's the standard then and what's the survival and how can we change that?
Yeah, unfortunately, when the patient recurs, which most of the time they do, and they usually do within the first 2 years of their diagnosis, I kind of describe it to them as sort of the Wild West. Anything's up for grabs. We think about clinical trials. That's the first thing that really comes to mind. What research is available to use immunotherapy, to use targeted therapy? What else can we leverage against this disease in sort of in a research fashion? Because that's really what's needed. Um, if that's not available, and sadly to say, most patients, the vast majority of patients, unfortunately, either don't know about clinical trials, they're not offered clinical trial opportunities, or are not near a center that has those opportunities, they will probably get another line of chemotherapy, which will likely be not particularly effective, or some sort of antibody drug that is also not very effective as well. It does buy people time, but unfortunately, tumors do recur within the first 6 months after starting those treatments.
So sadly, in these patients, when they're in that stage, the survival rate is what, less than a year, or what is
Right.
survival rate?
Very commonly, it's less than a year. It's very hard to get to a year in most of these patients.
So that's the desperate state that we see ourselves, Mark. And Simon and I talk about this all the time. Is what is this madness? Why have we not broken the back of glioblastoma? It's like, why have we not broken the back of pancreatic cancer? And in my mind, if we can break the back of glioblastoma and break the back of pancreatic cancer, it opens up the field in terms of the skeptics. So one of the conversations that Simon and I have had is let's examine what the first line of therapy is and let's examine the second line of therapy. And if you look at the first line of therapy, and the innovator is Dr. Roger Stupp. It's actually called the Stupp Protocol, in which you get radiation first, and then you get surgery, and you get a drug called Temodor, which is a chemotherapy. And I've asked myself, what does radiation do? And it wipes out those natural killer cells I just showed you. It wipes them out. Not only it wipes them out, it doesn't come back for a year. What does anesthesia do? It actually knocks out those natural killer cells. What does Temodor do? It completely wipes out also those natural killer cells. And then, by the way, you need steroids because you get brain swelling, and it wipes out those natural killer cells. So I asked myself, what is the logic of winning the battle and losing the war? So Simon and I had these conversations, and I asked Simon to please look at the thing called absolute lymphocyte count. And let's think about what happens when you have a patient who has failed first-line therapy. And maybe, Simon, you could give us your experience of what happened as we started the trial with Simon on that at Hoag. And he's now seeing a lot of patients who have failed therapy. And maybe you could give us your experience on that, Simon.
Yeah, sure. So, the trial that we're running is the immunity bio study looking at the NK cell therapy, the modified NK cell therapy plus N803 combined with bevacizumab, which is the antibody drug that is
Simon, it's my job
yes.
I'm sorry, it's my job to slow you down there.
Oh,
Because you
sorry.
just said, it's okay. You just said a bunch of stuff that I didn't understand, and I studied for the test. So just go back to 20 seconds and just explain what
Yeah.
each of those things is a little bit.
Yeah, I am really sorry. So
No,
we're
no, all
running a
good.
cool study. It is very interesting, and we're using Dr. Patrick's cells, these NK cells that are provided to us, and they're modified in a laboratory to be very active and angry against cancer. They target cancer, and
So
in fact,
are those injected?
they are injected through the IV. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead. So there's an
So we did. It's
injection
an
of these cells, and how are those produced?
Uh, Patrick, do you want to talk about how they're produced?
Yeah, so again, I want to be sure that this is not a Patrick show or but Patrick product show. This is really an opportunity to actually speak to this whole concept of lymphocytes. So what we are trying to do, Mark, is in your body, you have lymphocytes. So we are able to find a lymphocyte that we could take off the shelf, engineer it so it could go after the tumor. That's one of them, which you can infuse. It's a chemo-free lymphocyte that we've built and freeze them by the billions into little bags.
Okay, so those
Then,
are sorry, go ahead.
then you can activate the lymphocyte in a different way by unlocking the lymphocytes in your body so that your body is the factory by giving you an injection of a thing called IL-15 or N803 or Anktiva.
Mhm.
And that stimulates these lymphocytes by the billions. If you put these together, the hope is these lymphocytes now go to the tumor through the blood-brain barrier and get to the cancer without chemo in this instance. And let's find out what happens. And this is where I wanted Simon to talk
Yeah.
about that.
Mhm.
So Simon, how many people have you treated this way?
So we have now 8 people at my institution that we've treated.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of them are still, alive, and but it's still pretty early in the study. But all of them are getting these NK cells, these modified lymphocytes that we infuse through the IV, and the injection of the N803, the stimulating IL-15 drug that Patrick mentioned. And again, it's combined with the standard of care for recurrent glioblastoma, which is another drug called bevacizumab, otherwise known as Avastin. It's an IV drug. It's an antibody drug that is, again, very commonly given to almost all patients with glioblastoma when they progress after first line of treatment. So that is the
Yeah.
study. We did a little something a little bit unique here at Hogue that is worth mentioning to potentially synergize with what Patrick has developed. Actually, really excited to talk about that, and maybe we can pull up that MRI, and we can show your audience that as well.
Sure. So we'll
So
pull the
could we
graphic
pull up?
back up. Yep.
We've got a MRI, the Mark, that is Simon's patient that actually just underwent this treatment.
Right.
That's a different MRI. I think what you're seeing now, Simon, is a patient that we've treated before these trials. We've treated several patients on our side, Mark, and we've now had one patient live 4 years from the treatment after second line. But this is the patient that
Yes.
we're looking at.
Yeah, this is a very famous MRI in at Hogue because I don't mind showing it to everybody literally that I meet because it's truly a remarkable response. In fact, the patient is here to talk about his experience, and we can get to that as well.
Yep.
But
Just
um,
explain what we're seeing in here, and then let's bring your patient in.
yeah. So what you're seeing here, so this is the same brain of the same patient, but 2 months apart. And you can see that on the left that there is there's an abnormality there. It's that white spot that's circled in. That shouldn't be there. That is a growing tumor, a glioblastoma. This is a classic look for a glioblastoma. Irregular, solid looking, angry, and causing some architectural or just anatomy distortion in that space of the brain. So the brain is no longer sort of symmetric in a way because there's a lot of pushing. We treated this patient with 2 cycles, and 2 cycles are actually made up of 4 treatments. So two in one in the first cycle and two in the second cycle of this NK cell IL-15 bevacizumab combination. So, and then we got the MRI, which was 2 months apart from that first one. And you can see the bulkiness, that sort of that dense area of white stuff essentially melting away, and the architecture of the brain, the anatomy of the brain coming back into its normal natural shape. And you can see that actually because of these little black areas called ventricles. It's kind of hard for me to point them out there, but it's now that black area is now enlarged, and that's a good thing because the brain is now sort of opening up to its natural structure. So this was absolutely surprising, and we did do something different with this patient as well because, and I don't know, Patrick, do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to say that for
No,
later?
no,
Okay,
absolutely,
okay,
Simon.
okay,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So the thing that we did with Kayvon here, he's actually this is my patient, truly a pioneer. He actually wore a device called Optune. That is a device that goes on the scalp. So the patients have to shave their head, keep it shaved, and actually apply these I don't want to call them electrodes, but we call them arrays. But they're basically systems of antenna that cause an electric field to be generated through the brain, and that signal bounces between the antenna. So there's basically an array in the front, in the back, and two on the sides, and they talk to one another. And that signal that is being generated disrupts cell division. And the thing that we've also realized kind of recently, and I had the privilege to be on a big paper on this, describing this mechanism, is that not only are we disrupting cell division and these cells are dying because they can no longer properly divide, but the way they die, the mechanism of cell death, and its impact on that tumor microenvironment, which we'll talk a little bit more about, is profound because it sets up the environment to be extremely sensitive to what I think to the technology that we're using from Patrick, these NK cells and the interleukin 15 stimulant drug, the injection, to work in that environment even better. So it was pretty remarkable. This was unexpected, and I was just very happy that I had the opportunity to use this device. And I think this is providing us with some synergy and effect.
Kaywan, welcome. Very, very grateful for you to participate. And with you is your wife, hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly, Marjana.
Yes.
We're glad to see you here. We expect you to come on once every year. for the duration of the program. Tell us about what it's like working with Simon, what you learned, how you learned about the treatment, and how it's gone for you.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you all. My name is Kayvan Gudarzi. I live in Newport Beach. I'm 68 years old, just turned 68 last month. I was diagnosed with glioblastoma in March of 2024. I had no symptoms before. One day I woke up, felt a little unwell, and I asked my wife to see if she sees anything physical. She said, "You're a little bit not oriented properly." So we decided to go to Hoag Hospital, which is, I'm actually looking at the Hoag building from my window here. I'm very close to it. So we went to Hoag, got to emergency room. They did a CAT scan, then they did an MRI. They saw something, and they said, the neurologist is going to come and see you. Dr. Lewis next day came in and explained what GBM is. We had no idea what it was. Basically said, where it's placed is not going to be able to be removed. Hopefully is not stage 4 or stage 3. It's not going to be stage 1 because only young people get that. It's not going to be, hopefully it's 2. And they did a biopsy, took a piece out, and they sent it to Mayo to do the analysis, genetic analysis. Once we got this news, obviously it was a shock that this thing was in me and we didn't know about it. Just like any other patient, we started rounds. We spoke to Dr. Hagi, then went to UCI, Dr. Boda, went to UCSD, Dr. Khalesi, and just about every one of them. I went to City of Hope, Dr. Pant now, and every one of them said, you have this standard treatment. You have this standard treatment. What is it? Chemo, radiotherapy, chemo, radiotherapy. After a while, we realized it's almost like going to McDonald's buying a burger. Everybody says chemo and radiotherapy. So at that point, we had met Dr. Hagi and said, well, it's inoperable. The standard treatment is this one. What else can we do? Clinical trial. And doctor had seen me, always said that you might be a very good candidate for this. After going to a couple other places and confirming that this is the way it is, we reached back to Dr. Hagi and said, we have to start the standard treatment because I don't have much time. So we started treatment, as he had mentioned, the chemotherapy and the radiation. Thank God I had no reaction to chemo, but radiotherapy really knocked me out. At one point, I think Dr. Hagi mentioned that even though you're 67, but you have a brain of 87-year-old man, which was pretty amazing. So far, I've had no physical reaction. I am sure I will get worse unless the technology catches up, but we basically rolled the dice and relied on you guys to come up with something that is going to stop this disease or at least slow it down. And the past year or so, I'm realizing that everybody's working on the same thing. Early detection. If we have early detection, what can we do to minimize the effect of this radiotherapy or chemotherapy, like killing my immunotherapy? And then later on, once I got to the clinical trial, it showed us a way to treat this earlier. If we know, I actually volunteered for one of the tests that they had called focus radio ultrasound, which basically put me through the MRI machine, opened up the barrier, and constantly took my blood sample, which is brilliant because if the results come back that he expects it, in the future, I don't have to get a CAT scan to figure out I have this or not, or biopsy. You can tell it from your blood and start doing this treatment that Dr. Soon and among the other people have created to go after this disease without killing my immunotherapy, go and create it and make it stronger, which is brilliant. This is the way that everybody should treat this. I was very surprised that this disease has been around for 40 years. And wherever we went, Marjan and I, the treatment has been the same. Why is it not changed? Dr. Hagi suggested the Optune 1, which is a device that is created by a company called Novocure. I've been wearing it since the treatment has started. We stopped the chemo and radio about, I think, end of June. No, and I don't remember, end of March, sometime like that. And I've been in his clinical trials since then, wearing the Optum. Obviously, it works because the MRI that he showed you, along with the treatment, is reducing this nasty disease. And I'm still in the immunotherapy section. We're going to do an MRI end of this month. Hopefully, we'll be as positive as end of April. And then this way, we can treat patients better so they can live longer.
Okay, well,
Nasty disease, I keep hearing it's going to come back even worse, but I'm relying on technology, really.
Yeah.
I'm a resilient guy. I know how to take care of myself. We went on to something as well, the ketogenic diet. We had heard Dr. Hu at USC had done a clinical trial on it. My nutritionist had talked about it. So doctor said it's very difficult to get ketosis, but you can do it. And we did. We cut off all the carbohydrates, basically. Wheat, rice, pasta, potato, anything that is on the ground. I lost a lot of weight. I started, when I got diagnosed, I was at 223, the heaviest I've been. I'm at 157, 158. I am healthier. So I think combination of maybe the diet, the new treatments, lifestyle change, the help of a good support group like you guys and my wife, she's been a rock. You need to have a good support group. The decision that we made to go to Hoag was great. The radiotherapy took 10 minutes. I didn't have to drive 1 hour to get this treatment. Just the fact that you're relaxed is a better way to do it. So that's been my story. I'm happy. I thank for Dr. Hagi being very patient. Anytime he sees us, he knows we're going to have questions and he answers patiently.
Yeah, K1, you're a model patient for a variety of reasons, including every doctor I've ever seen told me, well, if you lost 50 pounds, whatever it is would be better. So I'm very impressed and grateful to you both for coming and joining. I'd like you to stay with us. We're going to take questions from the community, and I'm sure you two can weigh in with advice for folks and for the doctors as well. So as I bring folks in, just tell us where you're from and what's on your mind. You can address to anyone in particular. You just ask your question. We'll start with Rich. Rich, welcome and thank you for being part of Two Way.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Hey, thanks. Thanks for the show, Mark, and for the doctors for joining us too. We know they're busy. So I guess my question is, we do hear a lot about new treatment. To go back, my wife's been through stage 4 lymphoma 3 times, and starting back in the 80s, and then not a recurrence, but a new type around 2016. And then that did come back and transformed into something worse. So we've been at this a long time. And we trust our doctors. We started at Stanford back in the day, and now we're at University of Pennsylvania. So we do trust our doctors. We trust the institutions that they're at. And you do hear of new things, but we're kind of in the fight and doing our thing. And at this stage, new things don't come in very easily. The things that you're explaining, they could be years away. So how do these kind of new discoveries help us when, we're so far down the road?
Yeah, Patrick.
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear you and your wife are taking on the fight. Diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. My father-in-law passed away from it before Rituxan was approved, and I to this day kick myself because my doctor at UCLA didn't even refer him to Rituxan, even though it was in clinical trials. And I think very much like Simon says about clinical trials, the new things are in clinical trials. What Simon's patients have received, believe it or not, is an approved drug for bladder cancer. And the concept is a very different one. As I said, it is not the cancer we're fighting. It's your immune system that we're protecting that will fight the cancer, regardless of the cancer type. So this so-called BioShield or Na2/3 or Anktiva is being tried in lymphoma. And as you know, in lymphoma, you've had R-CHOP, I'm sure, and you've had chemotherapy, and I'm sure you've had Rituxan,
And
and you may
radiation and
radiation, and you're probably going now to CAR T cell therapy, and you probably had lenalidomide.
if we hopefully we don't get there, but yeah.
Okay. But, and by the way, the sad news about CAR T therapy as well, it's self-limiting, because what's happened is you need a reconstruction of this entire immune system, and both a combination of NK cells and T cells to give you immune memory. So that's a trial that we are now instituting already, where we are bringing this CAR NK therapy with CD19. I'm sure you've got a CD19 cooking there with that you've been talking to at University of Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to say is that this paradigm change of thinking about your immune system is really a very big change in the mindset of all the academic organizations and the primary community organizations. And it's not a struggle. We need to have this obviously go through the trials so that you and your family could benefit from it. So my recommendation is seek out as many advice as you can across the country, but also seek out the clinical trials that's going on now.
Simon, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I kind of alluded to. You have to have access, and you have to ask those difficult questions of the people who are treating you that you obviously trust. What else is out there? What are my options? Not just at the institution that you're at, but also, what research is currently being done. I think a lot of patients are hesitant because they feel like they're going to offend their doctor.
Sure.
Um, I, I encourage my patients to seek out second opinions. Absolutely. I don't pretend to know absolutely everything and have the cure for them. So the one thing I do caution the patients that I counsel, especially with a new diagnosis of glioblastoma, is that time is not on your side.
Right.
This thing is not waiting for you to get onto a clinical trial. So eventually a decision needs to be made. So, but I think it all starts with just having those difficult conversations and being forthright and honest with your providers, and also using things like clinicaltrials.gov to search for those options. Even on an international scale, it is a website. It's a repository of studies throughout the world,
Yes, I've
and you
seen.
you can find very great, very good studies on that.
Rich, thank you.
Thank you.
We're
Thank you,
grateful
guys.
to you for participating. Please come back. Leanne, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind for the doctors and our star patients.
Hi, I'm from Kansas, and my brother died of glioblastoma in 2018. After 4 months, he was 51. And so when they started his treatment, they said that he had glioblastoma, and then there was a doctor covering while he was in the hospital, and they said it was a gliosarcoma. My understanding of that is that it's more deadly. Is there different treatment that you would have done, or would it's been the same treatments? And then my second question is there any screening that can be done for glioblastoma, or is that pretty luck of the draw?
Yeah, do you want to take this one?
Simon, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So gliosarcoma is a very rare variant of a glioblastoma. We call it a gliosarcoma because it has what we call sarcomatous features. So the cells look odd, and we lump it in together along with glioblastoma. So it's a variant of a glioblastoma. Unfortunately, because of that, it's treated exactly the same. It's chemotherapy and radiation. But because of these sarcomatous features, it is biologically much, much more aggressive. It does grow much faster than a standard GBM.
Okay.
And a second question about screening. Is there a way to
Right. So
screen?
Unfortunately, it's a rare enough disease, especially gliosarcoma. So just put that aside. But GBM, only 13,000 diagnosed per year in the United States. And it's quite hard to screen somebody very quickly because this might require an MRI to do so properly. We are, as actually my patient Kayvon mentioned, we are trying to develop blood-based biomarker testing to to see if there are circulating tumor cells or circulating DNA associated with these tumors that might suggest the presence of a particular type of cancer. But the question remains, how often and at what age do we screen? We don't have the answer for that. Perhaps maybe some sort of genetic predisposition should make it a requirement for us to be screening people, but we just don't know yet.
Leanne, we can all hear in your voice how much you miss your brother, and very grateful to you for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you both, doctors, how can AI help with cancer research? How is it helping with cancer research now?
Well, I think we have to be very careful to not hype AI within, because the biology is really very, very complex. But I am using AI right now. What we're doing AI with regard to within the cancer world is looking at the histology, the biopsies of the slides, and having a thing called machine vision, identify what cell types are there. And we're getting a large database of slides that we can train a model looking at machine vision. So it's a different form of AI rather than large language models. So that's the opportunity that's going on. As you heard, the FDA, in terms of their AI, they are going to do reviews of applications, which will speed up, hopefully. That'll change, hopefully, the course of approvals so patients could be better access. But that's the way I see it at this point.
Ram, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind for the doctors.
Thank you, Mark. I'm from Boston area, and firstly, I'm extremely grateful to you, Mark, and the doctors. I don't think there is a show like this ever, and especially in a two-way kind of a conversation mode. So I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this show. My question to the doctors is, in terms of diagnostic utility, what do you guys think about the spinal CSF as a liquid biopsy to look at the circulating tumor DNA, not just for initial diagnosis, but for treatment response and monitoring, like our patient talked about the focused ultrasound. I know focused ultrasound, you can get the blood, but the sensitivity in blood for the circulating tumor DNA is extremely small compared to CSF. So especially as a treatment response monitoring and initial diagnosis, what is your opinion? And my second question is, you guys, this is fundamentally a different approach to solving cancer, right? Previously, cancer has been thought of as a mutation disease. So you go attack, a KRAS mutation or a BRAF mutation, and then that mutates. So you go attack. It's like playing that game where you go after, I forget the name of the game, but
Whack-a-mole.
Yeah, whack-a-mole, right? What you're saying is no. In some sense, am I correct in assuming, doctor, that you're proposing a universal theory of cancer almost, right? Where you don't have to go after specific mutations and address the mutation, but you are, strengthening the immune cells, increasing the amount of the lymphocyte count to attack cancers. And if that is so, what kind of pushback do you exist, or do you expect from the neuro-oncology community or the other oncologist community, because they've been practicing something, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, first-line therapy for, as you said, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is they are pretty slow to change. So what is your plan for getting this pushed through all these centers?
Those are two great questions. I know intuitively. Simon, before you answer the first one, I'm going to ask you, because I know you got it because you nodded, to rephrase the first question. So some of us who didn't quite understand it can understand it, and then answer it, please.
Yeah, sure. These are great questions. Perfect segues to, I think, what Patrick and I actually were thinking about talking about, and how we have a new way of treating cancer. So I think the first question was basically using CSF as sort of a repository for biomarker testing to look at that fluid.
Sorry, back up 20 seconds.
CSF. Yeah. Sorry, I apologize. This is like my day to day. This is like a regular Tuesday for me.
If you didn't use acronyms that needed to be explained,
Yeah,
I'd have no job here. So
I'm sorry. Right. So CSF stands for cerebral spinal fluid. This is the fluid that bathes the brain. The brain makes it, and it basically acts as, a way to circulate signals throughout the brain. It can also, it's a great way, it's how the brain cleans itself. And it all flows from the head down into the spine and back up to the brain. So this is incredibly important fluid. The thing is, this fluid, though, is segregated from the rest of the body via the blood-brain barrier. These are basically connections between cells that prevent mixing of systemic stuff, like blood stuff, like outside the brain, with anything in the cerebral spinal fluid. These compartments do not mix. And for that reason, actually, there's a couple of reasons for this. It's actually an evolutionary development on our end. It's because we're out in the savannah in the safari. We step on a snake. We don't want that poison to go directly from our bloodstream into our central nervous system. So we develop that way. But that barrier between blood and the CSF compartment also keeps out a lot of drugs. So we can't get drugs through into the brain very effectively. But the other thing that Ram mentioned was like, what about using it as a way to test um, how you're responding to treatment or even for diagnosis, things like that. This has been done to some extent. Brain tumors do not actually shed that much DNA into the CSF, but we can still pick it up to some extent, but it's just not reliable. The other thing is, how do you get CSF out? Right? It's a spinal tap. That is, if you've never had a spinal tap, I've actually had one. It is very uncomfortable. It is an uncomfortable experience, and to have it done repeatedly to assess how the disease is behaving is it would be difficult for patients. There is an exception though. Some patients get a port directly into the brain with a catheter that goes into the CSF. This is done with a neurosurgeon. So almost like somebody with cancer that gets a port in their chest to get chemotherapy in. All right. I think some people here might be familiar with that. You could do the same thing for your brain, and you can actually access it with a very small needle to get fluid out. And I actually do that now for some of my patients with something called leptomeningeal disease. This is an absolutely devastating complication of certain cancers that go to the brain and cover the brain with cancer cells. So you can get cancer cells out that way and deliver chemotherapy. But that's sort of the exception, and it's kind of a rare occurrence. But I do check DNA. I do check cancer floating DNA from that fluid to see how my patients are responding to treatment. So I think it's a very good question. It's just not very practical for anybody with like, any other tumors basically in the body.
Patrick, on the second question, one of the most mind-blowing books I read in college was The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. And it's mind-blowing because people assume that the current science is right and that their doctors have the best science because that's the current science. I think Ron's question is, how do you produce a revolution up against those who are invested in the status quo?
I think you now recognize why Simon was our first guest. Because, well, I mean that very much. A thoughtful clinical scientist with the best interest of his patients, period, is why, frankly, if anybody had brain tumors, should go to Simon at Hoag, and you'll be able to get his access. And I really mean that because this is going to be the struggle. What we have now maybe uncovered is not an invention. It's an evolution of understanding as we get enlightened in the evolution of mankind. This cell has been around for 450 to 460 million years ago in order for mammalian species to survive against infection, cancer. So what we've unearthed is almost the unifying theory of long life. I know that sounds nuts, but it's not. That this cell is the basis of what keeps us alive, whether you have cancer, whether you have infection, whether you have sepsis, whether you have a fungal infection, viral infection, bacterial infection, trauma, and it's all about lymphocytes. So if you change everything around, so Ram, with regard to the whack-a-mole, I spent 5 to 10 years of my life trying to find that whack-a-mole because I went into genomic sequencing, trying to kill the cancer from the inside out with all these mutations. And as you said, you hit one and you get another. Now there's billions and billions of dollars from Big Pharma looking at these mutations, and these drugs are still out there. There's billions and billions of dollars on Big Pharma about chemotherapy and radiation and checkpoint inhibitors, all of which knock out this unifying theory of life, your natural killer cell. And then we build these hematological therapies called epogen and neupogen so that you can get more chemotherapy, so that you can knock out more. So the logic of this is we need to step back and say, okay, what's keeping us alive without cancer? And what's keeping us alive right now as your stem cells are growing is that the natural killer cells are recognizing these cells that may be transforming and not being cancers yet and killing them. It has an innate, what you call innate ability to recognize and kill. So it is going to be difficult, where we can say a profound yet simple statement with a simple CBC, a simple $10 test, looking at the absolute lymphocyte count, which happens to be your NK cells, and making sure that it doesn't fall below 1,000 lymphocytes per microliter. It's as simple as that. If you can keep your lymphocyte level greater than 1,000, I can predict, and I have done that, by looking at anybody getting radiation. Within weeks of the radiation, your lymphocyte count drops below 1,000 and sometimes never comes back for 12 months. And then why are we surprised, therefore, that you've won the battle and that poor patient then gets metastasis? There's just been a paper out now that shows what they call abscopal and badscopal. So, Mark, for the lay audience there, forever we've known that if we give radiation at one site, a tumor may disappear in another site, which then says there's some systemic effect that's happened that's called abscopal effect of radiation. That has been the proud selling point of radiation. For the first time, a paper has just come out that says when you do radiation, actually what happens, you increase metastasis, and they've called that badscopal. And it's not a surprising biological event because you're wiping out the very cells. So when you say E equals mc squared, that's a unifying theory. And this, in my mind, is a unifying theory of longevity of life. Because as you age, these natural killer cells go down. As you get a viral infection, these natural killer cells go down. As you get sepsis in ICU, these natural killer cells go down. And as you get cancer, the natural killer cells go down. However, what's even more painful, when you get radiation, these natural killer cells are wiped out. So it is a sea change that's going to be very difficult. I get that, and maybe that's what the purpose of the show is, to educate, inform, and just follow the science. The most important thing is just follow the science and let the science speak, as opposed to any other agenda, and look at the data.
Ram, thank you. Two great questions. This program is long. It's been commented on. You won't find an hour-long conversation like this in the media. If Simon was on cable news, they might give him a minute and a half or 3 minutes if it were really long. And yet we barely scratched the surface. Their hand's still up, and lots of questions, and we'll be back next week. For now, Doctor, tell people about your institute and how they can get more information about what we've talked about here and about cancer in general.
Well, I think there will be many patients, whether glioblastoma patients or cancer patients, and I would advocate that they participate in a clinical trial. So our institute is the cssifm.org, but more importantly for patients with brain tumors, please reach out to Simon at Hoag. Simon, if you could give us, sorry, I don't have your direct.com or your home number, but
Oh, yeah.
if you don't
It's my
mind.
first name dot last name at hoag.org.
Okay. So if you'd like to reach out to the doctor, you can. And again, if you want more information on what we've talked about here today or cancer in general, go to cssifm.org. And we will, in the course of this program, we'll talk to lots of you. We'll talk to more patients, and we'll provide as much information as we can. The goal of this program, as I said at the beginning, is to inform and comfort and make people understand they're part of a community that's grappling with all of these complicated issues. And we're fortunate to have doctors like Simon and Patrick and exemplar patients like Jan to come here and share. So we're grateful to you all. Thank you. And we'll be back in a week. Next Tuesday, we'll tell you who our guests are going to be in a little bit, but we will be here every week, and we want to build this up. Please tell your friends, anyone you know dealing with cancer, to become part of this community, and we can make this a model for how to use technology to foster conversations like no other about something that if you're going through it, there's nothing more important. Simon, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you both.
Simon.
Thank you,
And
Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Godarzi's,
much.
thank you both, and send me some weight loss tips if you don't mind. And Patrick, thank you for being part of this. And I look forward to convening with you 1 week from tonight for our second episode.
Will do. Thank you
Okay.
all. Thank you,
Good night.
Simon. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night.
This will be available on YouTube. If you want to watch it or send it to your friends who might have missed it, please do go to twoway.tv on YouTube, and you can see the whole episode in just a few moments. Thank you all. Have a good evening. We'll see you next Tuesday night.
Tomorrow, doctor.